Welcome to the Trend Detection Podcast, powered by Siemens. And now your host, Niall Sullivan.
So, hello, and welcome to this latest episode of the Trend Detection Podcast. I'm pleased to have my colleague, Nat Ford, again on the podcast. For those who listen regularly, you'll know that Nat regularly joins us where we talk about the truth about predictive maintenance. Very honest about a lot of topics around that, and there's a lot of detail we go into on various different areas. But today we're doing a slightly different angle, I guess, in the same vein, but a slightly different angle, and something that's we've been discussing quite a lot recently, and is definitely of interest to people who are just about to start predictive maintenance projects, maybe already started and more thinking about starting them, because it is really interesting how you might decide to approach it. So I'm going to hand over to Nat. First of all, just to, I guess, briefly introduce yourself in one line. People might know you already, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, thanks, Niall. Hi, everybody. Good to meet you all. One line, but you haven't defined how long, so I'll waffle on for a while. I'm Nathaniel. I'm a business development director, previously sales director when we were Senseye. But at the core of that, I'm commercial and I do sales. And I always say on these sessions, the reason that me or people like me are justified in coming along and pontificating about the truth about predictive maintenance is because we, more than anybody else, get to see the full life cycle of an engagement from customers or companies who've never heard of PDM, let alone Senseye/Siemens, through to scaling to multi-sites and multi-countries. And believe you me, through those phases, there are lots of hurdles and challenges and misunderstandings. And as we've been through those journeys a few times, we have gathered some idea of what the truth is. So we aim to share that in these sessions. I think today we're talking about, actually, I'll let you talk about what we're talking about. Or did you just do that?
Well, sort of, but yeah, I can sort of reset it up again, I guess. But it's this proof of concept versus proof of value. And I'm sure people have probably heard, well, I'm going to guess, have probably heard more of proof of concepts as an ideal, especially in the predictive maintenance world. And we're sort of comparing the two approaches because, again, I said to you just before this call, I was talking to someone from Microsoft recently, and they're now thinking along the lines where proof of value offers more value, funny enough. But maybe we could sort of start the session that by sort of saying, and we've covered this before in previous podcasts as well. It's a good reminder of, what are the problems with proof of concepts? What do they, why do they cause an issue? Then we can come on to why proof of value sort of.
Okay. Well, I mean, at the core of it, I think it's because when we live this world, don't we? So we're deeply embedded in marketing, sales, and AI and PDM. And so we consider all the time, when I get to my desk in the morning, I'm thinking about which companies have engaged with, which projects have we started, which things are scaling, which things are in proof of concept mode, which things are, so this is everyday language. But for clients, especially those who are not part of a division who are paid to actively go and seek solutions, for those people who actually are doing a day job but that needs some changing, they might need a solution like predictive maintenance to do that job better. The word proof of concept or proof of value, it's sort of blah, isn't it? It's just vendors giving them acronyms. What they know as a kind of core tenet is that if they want to buy something, they probably want to try it. Makes sense, doesn't it? If you're going to invest time and energy, if you're going to buy something, you want to try it, see if it works. That's kind of logical. But there's a misunderstanding along the way there somewhere. And I think that this is not tied into just predictive maintenance. This is generically across. Actually, I started reading a book on the weekend about challenger sales. And like most books I start reading, I've only got through the first chapter. But the first chapter talks about various step changes in what happened in the market and the way sales approach works. And one of the things it talks about is the complexity that's put onto buyers now because of salespeople and sales processes and sales companies using more of a solution sale, which you have to do if you want to position a mature, complicated product like predictive maintenance. So when the client thinks, oh, we'll try it, they're opening themselves up to a complicated situation because you can't just try predictive maintenance. And yet, what we have experienced is it is very, very difficult to convince companies that it's not okay to just try it, thinking that you can then go on to, do a taste test and then go and buy it because it worked. Or, the other version of that is not try it, but show me it work, and then we'll use it. Again, it makes sense. But if you can't show me it doesn't work, why would I buy it? But it's such a complicated thing. If you open that box of show me or open that box of try it, it's multi-layered and very complicated. So one of our jobs is to explain what those complicated things are and to give people the chance to really sit back and think about what's required from them as a business in terms of resource, time, money, engagement, and what do they want to see from the outcome of something like that. So that's where the issue comes from. Not really whether it's POC or POV. It's whether someone wants to just try it or have a mature relationship with you where they understand what trying it actually means. And that's the bit that we're getting better, I think, and hope at debunking people's misunderstandings. Not debunking some of the current views, but unpicking the misunderstandings and helping people to understand what, in a mature and excitable way, what they should be doing to really get a fix on the value of our solution or any solution.
And what are those sort of complications, I guess, Nat, that you speak about? She talked about, complications with proof of concept.
Well, okay, so at a non-granular level, the main one is that you can't just plug in something like predictive maintenance and show it or try it. You can plug it in, if that's the expression you want to use, but then you have to have a period of time. You have to have lots of involvement, and you have to have people who are cognizant and engaged, and have a subjective view on the stuff that's coming out of the machine. And decision making. So the reason that's complicated is because it doesn't require someone just to turn up and sit down in front of you and consume with their eyes and go, "Gosh, that's good." It requires a proper project. Maybe it'll help if we actually talk about, if we think about. I've got two statements written in front of me. One is I wrote them, so they're open to debate. But this is my view. A proof of concept tests technical feasibility. So the question would be, can predictive maintenance be achieved in our context? So a company might say, we've heard about predictive maintenance. Let's test the technical feasibility to see if it can be done in our context. And that's great. And if the answer is yes, then hallelujah. You're ahead of a lot of other companies. If you've got infrastructure, data, etc., then you can invite a company like us in, and we'll come and do a POC, and we will demonstrate. We can test the feasibility. We can answer the question: can predictive maintenance be achieved in your context? But the answer to that, if the answer is yes, that's not the end of the conversation. That's the beginning of it. Because, what have we done? We've said, given your infrastructure, given what you've got in front of you, we can demonstrate that we can provide a service. But that service isn't the outcome. The outcome requires that you've got engaged people who are actually prepared to log in, have a look at the cases that are raised, go and investigate machines, enact change, discuss things within your maintenance stand-ups. Those things and those activities are what drive the value. So let's think about the proof of value. So the proof of concept, just to go back to that, tests the technical feasibility. It answers the question of whether PDM can or cannot be provided in your environment. The proof of value is the bit that measures the next bit, the real bit, as I like to think of it. So proof of value assesses business viability. It assesses the user impact and whether or not you can achieve a return on investment as a starting point. And that's completely different. So one is about the thing, technical capability, and the other is about time, operator usage. So so you could see one as testing a car in a garage, and the other is about using it for a year. And you don't get any value out of test driving a car. You get the value out of the usage of it. This is probably a clunky example, but it makes the point, right? So if we go back to the core problem we're discussing at the beginning, most people think that they can make a decision about whether or not to engage with a company like us on a topic like predictive maintenance by doing a quick proof of concept. But of course you can't, because it doesn't tell you anything apart from it's okay to open the doors or start the engine or begin the project. Is that a fair description of the difference between the two? Your perspective?
Yeah, I think so. I guess the difference between what you say between the two is if the car's in the garage, you can't properly road test it, can you? It's not like you buy it's like you're seeing a car in the showroom, buying it based on the showroom rather than proof of value, where you're taking it out the showroom, driving it around and really testing it, going down the motorway and giving it full throttle. I'm sort of taking it down.
If you're going to, so I guess the analogy would be better if it's about someone who wants to buy a fleet of cars for a lot of people working at a company. And there's lots of nuance and difference in the service that's provided. And yet you're trying to make that decision by going and verifying the fact that it's a car and that the wheels turn and that it goes forward when it's in gear. Those things, in a way, should be assumed. It's about how that fleet operation company are to work with. How quickly do they deliver cars? How nice are those cars to drive for the individuals, different types of individuals in your business? It's not going down that analogy any further, but the point is, so that maybe this issue is really simple. Maybe this issue is simple. People think they're making a grown-up decision about what they're measuring, and in fact, they're making a fairly naive decision about what they're measuring. And here's the next bit. This is how it plays out all the time, and this won't be unique to us. This will be across all sorts of technologies. And I wrote down the number 84 because I heard a colleague presenting in a different format earlier today about the number of projects that fail and don't go anywhere within predictive maintenance. It's currently 84%. Now, I don't know how many of those are based on technologies that aren't fit for purpose. There may be some of them, but I can guarantee that an awful lot of that number will be made up of projects that didn't go anywhere because they didn't actually set out to measure anything of any value from the offset. And by doing so, were doomed to failure because there was never going to be a trigger or anything coming out the end of it that allowed someone to move on to the next step. Can I tell you a bit about how we're trying to combat this issue at the moment? Because there is this. So one thing I haven't described is that what I rather unfairly referred to as naivety about people trying to measure something to make this much more complicated decision. That doesn't go away. You can say these words, but it doesn't change people's desire to do that initial test. And that's either because I'm incapable of communicating successfully, or I'm being flippant. Obviously, I'm a great communicator, but there's lots of challenges that are beyond us. So there's things to do with the company. There's budgets. There's other things which compete for time, which can be done that way. If you want to, I'm sure there's lots of physical things you can buy and products you can buy which you can test in that way, and you don't have to worry about all this complicated stuff that we're banging on about. So, just pointing at a company and saying you're asking the wrong question doesn't really help. What you need to do is find a way of allowing that process to be part of a big process that works. So what we're attempting to do now with clients is to help them to do a proof of concept, to run a proof of concept, but do it in a very controlled way. That means that there's no incorrect expectations or lack of the right inputs. And that should be a phase, and we call it phase one of a 2 or 3 or 4 phase project, where you move from a proof of concept to a proof of value. So you say that first phase is to demonstrate that this can be achieved in your environment, and then the next phase is to scale that. That scale can be across time as much as across numbers of assets and that sort of thing. But to move from the proof of concept to the proof of value in an agreed way. And the reason that's a good idea is because it allows people to understand what the strengths and limitations of a proof of concept are, and to have a roadmap that takes them to doing the bit that they're really going to need to do in terms of, as we know they're going to need to do, to be able to make a proper decision. Because if you if you don't describe it in that way and you succumb and you do a proof of concept, one thing it seems to happen all the time. You will talk about the fact that a proof of concept tests technical feasibility and the metrics. I think I've got here the metrics: POC success measured by technical milestones and technical proof points. But what will happen is people will expect it to demonstrate all the really juicy, exciting stuff that you can't do, the value stuff. So by describing it this way and having it siloed as stage one of a project, allows you all to agree upfront on what it is that they're investing time and energy for. And I like that solution. I like that. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say it's interesting. So it's almost like you got to align certain metrics for each stage, because I guess normally in a proof of concept everyone's expecting the big bang and the big success to justify the full deployment and off we go. But it's instead of that, it's adjusting your things, like what can we do realistically within a proof of concept, what are the objectives, and then we move on to the next stage. And then okay, so we've done that's great, so what are the objectives? And it's almost like, well, it's a bit like setting expectations really for each stage and not expecting the big finale to happen in that proof of concept. It's actually it's useful to do that so we can understand each other and how we work and how the systems work and whether we can fit in with what you're doing. But then maybe that's the object. Well, maybe you can say that's the metrics. That's the interesting thing between proof of concept and value here, I see, in the key metrics, because you can see the differences there. And I think that's at the core of it. There's got to be a mindset shift. And we talk about that in a marketing sense as well, in terms of when you, like what we've done. I know this isn't a marketing podcast, but we sort of shifted metrics away from traditional leads and volume of leads and MQLs and all this kind of thing to something more substantial, which is, how many of those become real opportunities, which is the real value. So I'd call that a shift to more of a proof of value, if I was going to fit it into that concept, rather than because we could say a proof of concept works, we've got thousands of leads, but it's not a good indicator, I guess. But maybe I've gone off too far with that analogy. But no,
I don't think you have at all. I think it's that's correct, and it's an important point. And I think also that it's important for us to work with clients to understand what it is you're going to measure. Talk about the metrics. What it is you're going to measure with the POV, the proof of value, because again, people want to know everything up front. They want to know as much as they can, so they're safeguarded against the risk of failure. Because nobody wants to back a project and ask for a budget and have it fail. And we need to be careful of not over-promising, because we're only doing half the story. We're providing the technology, they're providing the usage, they're providing not our maintenance team who are going to go and affect change, but our maintenance team who are going to input information, help the algorithms learn, etc. So we need to be careful on what we talk about as the key metrics. So I think when we discuss at a high level, we talk about key metrics for POV being success measured by cases, user adoption, and return on investment. And they're the three dimensions which are important. But obviously, you need to have some sensible, smart things that you're trying to achieve in there. But again, but that's just driving towards making sure that people understand what the questions are they should be asking, and having a way of measuring them. And we've made the mistake before. We've had situations, where we've run small projects using offline data, where if we'd had to write it down on paper, we would have said we were testing the technical feasibility, but then we haven't. So the client then wants us to reduce or increase their overall operating effectiveness. They want to see a reduction in downtime events, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. But we haven't told them that's not going to happen. So
yeah, and that's clearly going to be like the ultimate goal. But again, it's what we're saying about there's different stages. We have a deployment stages for a start, but if we're breaking it down, proof of concept, proof of value, scale, except all have separate metrics and should have separate metrics. If we all judge things by the same metrics, then it just wouldn't work at all. In life as well, if we judged everything in the same way, then it just with the same measure, just wouldn't work.
Exactly. And actually, I suppose some of this comes down to the fact that the client doesn't necessarily know what's important to them in those interim stages. They know that they're buying predictive maintenance because they want reduced downtime. if that's their goal. They want more effective maintenance. But for those clients who want reduced downtime, that's quite a clear goal. But there's lots of metrics that have to be applied between now and then to get there. They don't necessarily those are. So we have to help build them. Yeah, that can be challenging. So, for example, number of things that they might. If you remember, about 5 years, our contracts used to say that this project will be deemed successful when Senseye has raised the case that, I can't remember the wording, but that everybody would agree that that case had alerted to them to something that was going to lead to a failure. And that seemed to be logical to us. But of course, that wasn't enough for clients. They needed more than that to build a business plan on. Because what we'd done in that instance is we had effectively completed a proof of concept for them. But we come on to learn that they need much more than that. So those two last points didn't really tie together. I apologise for that.
No, that's all right.
Stream of consciousness.
No, it's all good. It just made me think about, like, maybe you could explain how, cause we've probably talked about it a lot on the podcast, our deployment methodology, Senseye knowledge platform, but how does it tie into those important early stages where, the workshops, we're sitting down with the customers to define some of this and map some of this stuff out?
Well, so a POC or a POV, doesn't matter which route you go down. Well, it does when you go down the route POV, but whichever route you take, before you can get to that stage, you have to make the right decisions about what you're going to apply this period of analysis to, this period of testing. And yeah, you need to start setting expectations to get this stuff right before you've made a decision about these things. So what you're asking about is the workshop. So we divide our overall processes roughly into four. Well, there's actually 5 phases. One which is before engagement, which is scope, which is understanding the client and then understanding us and going through these conversations and discussing things like difference between the POC and the POV. But then we have design, deploy, operate, and refine. And design and deploy are, before you've got a service. So this is the design part, is when you're working out, where do we want to apply this technology? What do we want to apply it to? What kind of data do we need? Do we need to retrofit any sensing technology? Can we get everything for PLCs? All those kind of questions. And that has to be done in a formal and organized manner. So we run workshops, kind of best practice workshops, in order to make sure that we've gone through those stages in a way that we know is right and responsible. So that when you start a project, whether it be a POC or a POV, you're set up to win. You're set up to have a successful learning process and the best outcome you can get. A lot of this stuff should, once you engage with the client, the logic of this stuff should become clear through those workshops. But of course, we have to get to that point.
Yeah, so I guess, I see what you're saying. So this is sort of a discussion even before you get to the workshop stage. It's sort of, because you need to know what's the best route to go down, I guess, out of the two, which is most applicable in that situation. And then the detail comes in the workshop.
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
And also, in terms of just thinking about the proof of concept side, is it? I know it's everyone wants a sort of try before you buy solution. I mean, I'm just wondering because we have proven a lot of proven success cases in predictive maintenance. One of those things that it's still sometimes too good to be true. Is that still something you come across that, it's still too, even when you've got proven outcomes, is that still a barrier that needs to be sort of overcome?
Yeah, and that's sort of bi-directional. So part of that is that companies might have tried something before and it hasn't worked, or they've heard tales of woe from friends and colleagues at other companies. So it's it's still perceived as newish technology. So whilst a lot of people are doing it, people might still think that they're early adopters. So they want to get involved in some kind of show me it work before we engage. But the other bi-directional part of it, the other direction of it that feeds that, is that people still have outlandish ideas of what they can achieve. And that's part of the kind of education process that we go through, communicating what's the art of what's really possible, what should you or can you aspire to the predictive maintenance. That's still a big frustration for me. I find it difficult because it puts you in a semi-awkward situation. Because if you come to a business to discuss the potential of predictive maintenance, if they have outlandish ideas of what it's going to afford them, then you have to really unpick that and take them back to a good base starting point before you get anywhere near talking about a proof of value, a proof of concept. Otherwise, they're going to be completely out of kilter with what they want. So to give you an example of that, there'll be customers we speak to who have a very specific use case where they have a piece of machinery or a number of pieces of equipment. But they want us to be able to give a very long-term projection of failure. But more than that, they want us to give them long-term projection of the remaining useful life, an indication of end date, and notification of why something's going to fail. And of course, there are probably a handful of use cases where that can be done, some very specific things. But we're talking about applying this process to lots of different types of machines and lots of different types of environments. It's a false aspiration. It's not needed. You don't need to know exactly when things are going to fail in the future. You need to avoid failure. Of course, it'd be neat if you knew the exact remaining useful life of everything in your factory, for example. That'd be great, but no one's going to provide that to you. That's functionally the difference between a watch and time travel. This is predictive maintenance, not reading the future. So you need to depick a lot of that stuff, bring down the expectations, and not in a depressing way. Just make them realistic and valuable. So a product like Predictive, or like our product, is a generalist tool that generally will, across the balance of your plant, give you good insight as to when things are beginning to change that might lead to failure. And if you react to them well, then you'll have a really good, strong impact on the events that occur within your environment. And then you move on to becoming much better and more controlled in your maintenance interventions. So we talked about this a lot in other things, avoidance of failure by using the system well, and then a much better, more precise, controlled maintenance project or process because you trust the system and the inputs that it's giving you. That has nothing to do with accurate long-term prediction. So I'm making this a bit of a labour point, but in order to correctly be able to assert what can be done in the proof of concept and then correctly assert what can be done in the proof of value, you need to get people to the same starting point of understanding what they should be aspiring to achieve. Otherwise, they'll be scratching your head and wondering why you went to a POC, because it should be easy. Just take one of our assets and show us that you can tell us when it's going to fail in the next 3 years and what it's going to fail from. And we can't. And if people don't verbalize that that's what it is they think you're going to do, then you can see how there might be some misunderstanding of why you don't want to engage in something like a POC.
No, exactly. And again, we have that fundamental question a lot about number of assets to start with. I guess that's a hurdle that needs to be overcome. It's like, let's just try it on these 2 or 3 assets and see how we go. And then if it's working well, then we'll scale to whatever. But that's often the case, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or quite often the case.
Yeah, and I listen to other salespeople when they hear that. It's not really objection when they hear that request. And commonly what you'll hear people say is you can't do a proof of concept on 1 or 2 assets. You need to be on 100 plus because you need to see failure. And I sort of agree with that. Obviously you want cases to be raised, and the more assets, the more likely to have cases raised. The first mistake with the statement is, though, you don't want to see failure. We're trying to avoid failure. You want cases to be raised that on inspection, we can all agree are cases which are notifying you to change in data that correlates with something that's happened that's going to lead to failure in the future. And it's an important point because we're trying. The whole point about this tool is that it's supposed to do something that you can't do in any other way. It's supposed to alert you to change early enough that you can do something small and minor and fix, change the future. So it needs to be able to do that. But the real reason, I think, from the projects I've worked on, that numbers of assets is key, is that first point. But you might be lucky and get cases on 1 asset. It's more for me about how seriously the project's taken. If we go back to what proof of value is, proof of value requires people. If you think of a 10-person maintenance team, you want them to say after 6 months, I hope our company invests in that Senseye technology because I can see that it's really useful in our context. If they're looking after a whole plant and you're running a project on 10 assets, they're not going to give two hoots. They're not going to log in. It's someone else's project. Best case scenario is that someone comes and says to them, can you look at that? Can you go and look at that robot? Because there's a case that's been raised on this anomalous piece of technology that we're testing in the digital department. That's rubbish. No one cares about that. It's just annoying. You want the maintenance team to be in their stand-ups looking at the 3 or 4 sources of information they currently use to drive their conversations and Senseye. And you want them to be excited about that. It might be an individual who's driving that process, but it needs to be a significant enough portion of what they're considering. It needs to be across a significant enough part of the things or the assets they care about that it's important to them. Otherwise, who are you? You're just an anomalous little project happening. Another little anonymous project that some clever person from whatever department has imposed upon them. So the technical reason is about exposure to central problems. But for me, the real thing is the cultural stuff. I don't like using the word cultural. About just the day-to-day stuff of actually being relevant in their context.
Yeah, and it's about putting significant time, focus, and resource on if you want the significant results that we've seen and often talked about. And that's why we say, we're not just saying it because it can come across, you want more assets because you charge per asset. But actually, it's a chicken and the egg situation, because if you don't, more assets and more chance of failures and more chances of success and It's that bit that's got to be understood.
Yeah. Oh, well, let's deal with that. Let's deal with that potentially ugly topic of money. It should be the wonderful. I mean, all companies are there to make money. So I don't know why it's ever an issue. Clearly, there is a commercial difference between a POC and a POV, and sometimes people want to do a POC because it's smaller and therefore cheaper. But based on everything we're saying, you just do a standalone POC. It's cheaper, but it's also much more expensive because it's a waste of time. And you can have lots of them, and then you're going to fall into the 84% gang. And you're not going to end up with a predictive maintenance solution, and you're going to have lots of downtime. So you've solved nothing and spent a bit of money, which arguably is horrendous and much, much worse. A proof of value needs more assets, needs more onboarding time, it needs more engagement from us with your teams, and therefore is more expensive or less cheap, depending on how you want to define it. Everything we do when we're helping a company decide what to do should be paid for. It's consultancy. We're not out flogging medicine off the back of I can't remember what they used to do, the medicine men. But it's a grown-up engagement with an organisation. We're helping them assess the viability of a type of technology in their environment. And they should most definitely be paying for that service, much as they would not expect to give their products away for free. But also, if you are the sponsor of a project and you're trying to get Senseye into your organization, it would be a big mistake to keep pushing for discounts and trying to get things from the wrong budgets just to get them in, because you don't teach your company and the company's processes anything about the engagement with us. So I keep saying Senseye, I mean Siemens, but Senseye within Siemens. You are much better off treating us right from the beginning as a serious vendor, and letting us engage in your preferred vendor lists with your needs for, whatever terms and conditions we need to negotiate between the two businesses. All those kind of hurdles which are going to come along. Let's meet those now. In a way, they're part of the proof of feasibility, aren't they? What if there's some reason there where we can't engage as businesses? Let's find that out. Let's go through this robust process and pay top dollar. Pay the amount you're supposed to pay for the service. Because guaranteed, if you don't, will be taken less seriously in your corridors. We need to be a serious vendor who are then providing consultancy on a complicated and exciting topic. And we need to be treated seriously on an individual basis in meetings and financially. And you, as the project manager of that process, the sponsor of that process, will be given more gravitas. Do this stuff for free and you do it in the wrong way, you'll be this sad, also ran project down the corridor that people don't put their time into. People don't turn up to the meetings. Just a simple logic. It's time. Put the time and the money into it, and the rest will follow.
Absolutely. And see, we're coming up to time. I think it's been a really interesting discussion. I think you just summed it up quite nicely there. Now, there's only sort of final additional thoughts on top of that, or I think you probably summed it up quite much.
Yeah. So if there was somebody who listened to this who was speaking to another company on predictive maintenance, another topic, doesn't matter, and they wanted to work out how to take what it is we're discussing into a buying process, I would sit down with the person you're buying from and ask them specifically what they will get, what will they be able to learn from a proof of concept, and what will they be able to learn from proof of value. Discuss those things and try and understand it and work out what the things you are that you need to learn so you can make an informed decision. That'd be it really. To try and take some ownership of it, because we as vendors are pushing this onto buyers at the moment, and buyers need to then reverse that and take control. Start to dictate what they expect to be shown and included. Exactly.
Absolutely. But yeah, Mo, really interesting session. Of course, I think we do what we usually do is in the show notes we put a link to Nat's LinkedIn. So if you want to sort of discuss this further or discuss a project with him even better, then please sort of reach out to him directly. But aside from that, thank you for your time today, Nat. Again, it's been great to chat through such an interesting topic.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Please like and subscribe on all major podcast channels and find out more about Senseye Predictive Maintenance at Siemens.com.